Okay, so I gave this lecture at another course I gave at IDC, Weichmann University, about digital innovation, so that's why you have the title in here. And this is what I want to cover in this class. It's kind of a lot of stuff, but the main theme is that a lot of what you thought about innovation is wrong. And I'm going to give you a lot of examples about why what is kind of common thinking about innovation is actually not correct. And it's the good thing, which means because of what I'm going to show you, it means there are many, many opportunities for innovation. So I'll start with what is business innovation. I'll explain what the difference between innovation and business innovation. I will talk about whether it is revolutionary, wow, something new happened, a revolution, or it's actually an evolution, which means step by step things evolve. Discuss several examples of innovation successes. And there's a whole concept of innovation enablers, which I will detail and explain to you what it is, and then show you a lot of successful business innovations and the enablers that made them happen. So you will see the correlation between an idea and when is the time ripe to take that idea forward. So there are a lot of great ideas when the time is not ripe. They will just fail. When the time is ripe, they're going to succeed. And talk about what are the enablers today. And actually, there are so many that your head will start spinning. And that's what I said is the hope for you guys to do something really, really interesting and do it at a very low effort and low cost. And then talk about the difference between technological and business and the first mover's advantage, right? You all heard first mover advantage. I will show you that staying in bed and not being the first mover is actually a better idea. So, so all of you who don't like to get out of bed, that's the reason. Okay, so what is innovation? And is innovation evolutionary and revolutionary? So, question, who invented the light bulb?
Thomas Edison. But he stole his idea from someone else.
Okay, the light bulb, which is kind of the symbol for innovation, right? It is the symbol of innovation. So let's see who invented it and when. And it wasn't Moshe Rabbeinu and it wasn't Newton. Okay. That's okay. So the first electric lighting was an arc lamp. It had two rods that you have sparks running between them. Actually, Humphrey Davy, who was the first founder or manager of the Royal Institution in London, early 1800s, and he invented that. That was gave a very powerful light, made noise actually because of the sparks, and they used it in lighthouses actually. So Britain was, as you know, the biggest navy in the world at the time. So they needed a lot of lighthouses, and it was used for lighthouses. That's 18. Then there was competition on light bulbs. And as you can see in here, there were several people who won the competition. We're talking about 1877. And here's the whole history. So I won't read all of it, but you can see there are many people involved in this, okay? And actually, as you can see on the right, there is a light bulb that looks very similar to what we used. But actually, it wasn't invented by Edison. It was invented by, who are the people? There are two people who also got a patent in 1878. So what did Thomas Edison invent that is different than what all of these 100 years of work? What he invented was a light bulb that could run for 600 hours to 1200 hours. So all the previous light bulbs had a fairly short span of life, like a few hours or tens of hours, and that wasn't very useful. So he worked really, really hard on inventing the filament inside the bulb so that it would not burn out. That was his invention, okay? But the whole idea was on for, I don't know if 100 years, but 80 years for sure. So just to show you the span of time it takes for an innovation, for an invention, to go from an idea and a demonstration all the way to use. Just a side story. The first cartel, well-documented cartel in the world was around light bulbs. Are you familiar with the story? So they developed light bulbs. After the patent expired, there was General Electric, which was actually Edison General Electric, and Westinghouse and others, and there were two German companies as well that are still in the play. And they had a problem. The light bulbs worked and worked and worked. And when they work, you don't replace them. When you don't replace them, there's no business. So they met in London, because in the US they couldn't meet because there was anti-cartel laws in the US. So they met in London in a hotel room and said, we have to develop a light bulb that will burn after about 1,000 hours. That's it, 1,000 hours. But the problem was they couldn't do it because the light bulbs were actually good and they worked. So they spent like 2 years of innovation to make the light bulbs burn after about 1,000 hours. And the whole thing came about just like 20 years ago. They found the discussions in the documents showing that. So sometimes the innovation is in this direction, and business innovation is how do we make sure it doesn't work? Okay, so remember that. So what triggers the evolution of innovation? So what you will see, and I'll give many, many examples soon, that many innovations are independently developed by different peoples at the same time. And this is one of the most well-known and researched subjects, that when the time is ripe, when there is enough information to lead you in the right direction, many people at the same time, or virtually the same time, come up with the same concept, idea, or even a whole theory. Okay, so when you wake up in the morning and there's a light bulb, right? And you say, I have a great idea, go and look in Google, you will probably find about 10 people ahead of you. So don't get, it's not that bad, okay? That means you're in the right direction. If nobody ever thought about it, maybe you're wrong. So this is the most famous example. Who invented or discovered evolution? Darwin, right. Did anybody ever hear about Alfred Wallace? Yes? No? Okay. So at the time when Charles Darwin was thinking about and writing about evolution, he actually didn't publish his ideas for 20 years. Do you know why he didn't publish his ideas?
I'm sure that the community is not ready to hear about that.
Why?
Because the time wasn't ready.
No, it's more specific. Why didn't Darwin?
Because everybody believed in the Bible and its way of thinking.
And
he was afraid that
They will be killed.
Yeah, they will.
so, what is my origin? Do you know what my origin is? Chimpanzee.
Oh.
Okay? Even Gavin, even though he tries to pretend, he's also from a gorilla or something. So that was shocking because now we can talk about frogs, we can talk about anything, but talking about us, that was shocking. So he, even in the origin of species, he didn't write about human species. There's only a book later on when the whole thing burst out that he wrote about it. But in his first book, he didn't mention man because it was way too volatile. So he didn't publish for 20 years. Then one day, there was a letter coming from that guy, okay, Alfred Wallace, basically about 10 pages describing the theory of evolution. Alfred Wallace was what's called a naturalist at the time. That was basically a researcher in biology. And he was also traveling in the jungles in the Far East, actually, came up with the same concept, same idea, sent a letter. The letter arrived at the Royal Society, which is different than the Royal Institution. The Royal Society was the big guys. The Royal Institution was for the smaller guys. But anyway, the Royal Society got a letter from Alfred Wallace, and it came to Mr. Lyell. Mr. Lyell was the head of it. He was a great friend of Darwin, and when he saw that letter, he went to Darwin and he said, Darwin, if you don't publish, somebody else is going to do that. And he gave him the letter. Darwin said, that's a wonderful letter, and we're going to present it in our next meeting. So Lyell said, are you nuts? And he said, well, the guy found it by himself. So at the end, Charles Darwin, all his life, called it the Darwin-Wallace theory. It's one of the rare examples where somebody that was 20 years ahead recognized that another person did the same work, gave him, they were friends. Later on they became good friends and worked together. So, but this is the greatest example. Lamarck. So what are the enablers? Well, the idea of evolution wasn't new. Okay, there were a lot of people who thought about it. These are people from the late 18th century talking about it. So Lamarck came up with the same idea, except that his theory was different. He said that changes that happen to the animal during its life are inherited by the offspring. Darwin believed differently. He said it's all genetic. Whatever genes you get with the time of inception, that's what you have. So Lamarck became kind of a pariah. Nobody believed in what he was doing. That was a whole big thing. And it turns out he was right. It turns out that there are inherited traits that animals do acquire during their lifetime. I won't go into it because that's not the subject, but it's really interesting that today both Darwin and Lamarck are proven to be right. Charles Lyell, that I mentioned before, he was a geologist, and he wrote a book about how the world, the globe, evolves, talking about movement of continents. And his greatest insight was the time it takes. Remember that the Christians believed that the world exists for 6,000 years. 6,000 years is just not enough time for evolution. So Lyell basically said that the world existed for millions of years. He didn't mention how much. They believed about 20 or 30 or 40 million years, doesn't matter. And Charles Darwin, when he was on the Beagle, that's the boat that he was on for a few years, he read the book many, many times, and when he agreed or thought about the fact that this is going to take tens of millions of years, there is time for evolution, okay? And as I said, Lyell was the head of the Royal Society. And Thomas Malthus. Thomas Malthus was actually, I think, economist. And he came up with the theory that there's going to be a disaster coming forward because people multiply exponentially. It's enough that every couple will have 4 children and the world will be covered with people very quickly. But food production grows linearly. You are in college, right? So you know exponential goes like this, linear goes like that. The difference between them means hunger. There will not be enough food to feed the world. And people who are hungry are angry. And when they're angry, they are going to start fighting. So he predicted that there will be a horrible situation going forward. Luckily, with people, it didn't happen, and the world is different today. But that gave Darwin the solution of how come this whole thing works, because there are many, many more offsprings than survive. Just look at a tree. How many seeds a tree produces? Probably in the hundreds of thousands of seeds spreading around. And how many trees grow? Only 1 or 2 or 3 from each tree every year, right? Why? Because the rest of them are eaten, are dying, whatever it is. So the idea of Malthus about population growing exponentially basically means that most of these offsprings die. And in nature, that's what happens. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about more concurrent innovations. And remember, the main thing I'm trying to tell you is when the time is ripe, many people come up with the same idea. The reason I brought the evolution in Darwin was to show that there were foundations. The ideas were around. Okay? People were talking about it for 100 years, maybe more. What Darwin did is he took all of these ideas, put them together, and basically built a coherent and consistent theory that later on can be proven to be right. Okay? Happens a lot. Ideas circle around, people think about them, and suddenly, when they come together, people say, "Oh my God, this is it." Okay? Light bulb, as I said before. Okay? So the other very, very famous is the feud and bad blood between two very, very smart people. Isaac Newton and Leibniz both invented the calculus. Okay? And actually, this feud between them was very, very well known. And I'll jump all the way. The discovery of origin, natural selection, you know, all of that stuff. I'll keep going. Okay. If you haven't yet understood what I'm trying to say, it's not a revolution, it's always an evolution. It always comes step by step. What happens when somebody comes up with an idea that is totally ahead of its time? It disappears. In most cases, it just disappears. It is discovered many times. It is discovered dozens or hundreds of years later, if anybody wants to look at it. But at the time when they came up with this concept, just there was not enough people believed in what they say, and it disappeared. Okay. The most interesting example is Mendel. Mendel developed the laws of inheritance in 1860. He wrote an article in some obscure magazine in Czech or something, Slovak, and nobody read it, basically. That was before Darwin published The Origin of Species. In the early 1900s, two Dutch researchers did basically the same experiments, got the same results, and wanted to publish their findings. And they decided to start doing some literature search, and they found Mendel's article, and Mendel was dead already at the time, and they gave him the credit. Again, one of those. You try to tell it to people, and you see if everybody is laughing or people listen. Yep. Many inventors were tremendously desperate for recognition. Some of them even committed suicide. I'm serious, okay? Some people who came up with innovation and ideas that nobody wanted to listen, and they got so depressed that they committed suicide. So don't commit suicide. If you have an idea and nobody listens to you, just write it down. Stamp it so that everybody knows. What I do is I send emails to my lawyer, so the emails have a timestamp. I'm serious, okay? Yeah, because you want to timestamp it, and that's a very good way to do a timestamp, because he's a lawyer, right? So people will trust him and so forth. Okay, innovation always relies on things that preceded it: ideas, theories, technologies, resources, and we will talk about resources later on. Now, this is the main point I want to talk about between what is an idea and innovation in terms of ideas and product innovation success. Okay? There's a huge difference between the two. Light bulbs existed for 100 years, but they were not successful because there was no electricity. Okay? Remember that when Edison invented the light bulb, there was no electricity. I mean, there was electricity, but there weren't like lines at every house that you can get electricity. So he basically invented two things at the same time. That's why General Electric is General Electric. It also developed the whole system of producing electricity, generators that produce electricity, as well as light bulbs. And the light bulb was the main reason why the generation, electrical generation came about. Okay? All right. Here's another example. That's my company and my product. And happened exactly as I described to you now. One night, at about midnight, I woke up my wife and I said, I have a great idea. Great idea. Because at that time, scanners became smaller. Technology for optical character recognition that can recognize the letters on the business card. And I'm a good engineer. I can write software that analyzes it. I can build a business card scanner. And I was very excited, and my wife said, okay, can I go back to bed? And I was very polite, and I said yes. So I started working on it and hired an engineer to go and work on it. And then there was, once a year, there was a huge show called Comdex, where everything that has to do with PC, I'm talking now about 1993, 1994. So I go to the show to see what the world is doing, and as I walk into the exhibition hall, there's a huge booth with a guy selling this. So I called Dexter, my co-founder, and I said, Dexter, we're not the first. And I'll tell you a sentence that you better remember for the rest of your life. He said, if you can't be the first, be the best. Remember that. We became the best. We controlled the market, and we were very successful. Okay. Now I want to talk about the electric car. When was the electric car invented?
In 1919.
Exactly, you can read. That was the test to see if people read what I write. You passed, by the way. Why? Because it was easier to drive than a gasoline one. It was quiet, no pollution, and it was perfect for short drive, and it cost about $1,750, okay? Great car. That's 110 years ago, 120 years ago. What happened? So Mr. Ford, Henry Ford came, and he was the killer, or he went with a machine gun and he killed it, but he did it nicely. He introduced it in 1908. The cost was much, much lower, as you can see, almost a third of the price. Because it was fueled by gas, the range was much, much bigger. The system, the road system, has grown more significant, so people can take longer rides, because when you don't have roads, you don't care about how far you can go. You anyway go in the neighborhood. And you didn't have to do this, like you can see the movies to start the car. There was the electric starter. And crude oil was discovered. And so oil was cheap, and 15 million Model T were built, and the electric car disappeared. So what made them come back? So here's what happened to them in recent years. So in 2010, virtually nothing. Okay, this is still 2019. Okay, so the market share is 2.5%, which is how many millions of cars? 2 million cars. Okay. Today it's probably much, much bigger, as you can see. So a revival of electric cars. So besides Elon Musk, what caused it? So first of all, the environment has changed. People started to talk about emissions. They talk about government subsidies. A lot of it was subsidized. Tesla, or Elon Musk. I won't go into details in here, but just one sentence. He came at this issue as, I have a PC, I have a computer, let's put wheels on the computer. So his entire thinking was, I have a computer on wheels. Whereas all the other car companies, I said, I have a car, let's put a computer in it. I'll give you one example of why there is a huge difference. You open your PC in the morning, and you see that it is rebooted, right? Downloaded the new version and rebooted automatically. How many times your car rebooted? Never. Right? Car companies, the concept of rebooting my car was so alien that you can't even believe it, okay? For Tesla, it was obvious. I have a computer, I need to put in the best software ever, every day, every morning, right? So electric cars today do, change their operating system or improve the operating system on an ongoing basis, right? So that's just a small example of the difference in mindset. If you think about your car as a PC on wheels, things that were unheard of before suddenly become obvious, and vice versa. Okay? Much better batteries. Why are there much better batteries than in 1920? Did you ever see something like that? Yeah? How many of those are? How much does it weigh, There's a battery in here that works for a whole day with a nice screen, color screen, right? And it has to be very lightweight, by definition.
People won't buy it.
Exactly. How many of these are sold every year? Right. So there is a whole market that justifies the investments to make the batteries lighter with more power. That's it. And that became possible because there was something before it. And what was the something before it? Here it is, right here. Okay, so computers became lighter. You can take them with you. I still had computers that weighed 4 kilos, laptops, 4 kilos. I walked with them because it's better than a table PC, right? Which was better than a mainframe. So what you see is the evolution. Remember, not revolution, evolution. And the evolution is business driven. When there is a need and there is a market, there's a solution. It's really simple. Okay? So here is what the battery's improvement. Okay, from 2008, where they had 55 density of energy to weight, it went up to 450 in a very short period of time, in 12 years. Why? Because there was a need, there was a huge market waiting for it. That's what happens. Okay, and here's what the growth is with PCs and phones. Okay, so you can see what I said before. Now, why do we have an iPhone?
Because we have everything in one place. Camera, a phone.
We were educated.
Computer in your hand.
Comfortable.
Okay. Is it really a phone? It's not a phone anymore, right? You don't use it as a phone. Sometimes you make phone calls, but nowadays nobody makes a phone call. You send a WhatsApp, right? Right. When was the last time you guys used the phone? Like to talk? When we're innovators, right? We don't use that thingy to talk, God forbid. When my daughter was, I don't know, in 3rd grade or something, so she was texting with a friend to go to the movies. And so they were debating and sending messages back and forth for an hour, and she gets agitated. And my wife said, "Why don't you call the kid and talk to him?" And she looked at me like, "What? Call the kid to talk about which movie you go to?" So yes. Okay. So we talked about that. Okay, so you all know what we're doing, so I'll skip it. But why do we have the iPhone? So there are enablers. You start seeing what I'm talking about all the time about enablers. So a computer that is what we call handheld computer existed for about 30 years. You guys are young, so maybe you are not familiar with them. Do you know what BlackBerry is? Right, BlackBerry existed before. Palm Pilot existed before. There was even a computer, Newton. Did you ever hear about Newton? Newton was a handheld computer done by Apple in the 90s. Okay? Failed. So there were many, many successful handheld computers. Successful, I mean they sold hundreds of thousands or small millions of units, which is pretty big. Okay, these are pretty big companies that did it. BlackBerry was very big, but it has nothing to to compare to the iPhone and the revolution of the iPhone. And the reason, and the question is why? What was different? Was it because of the nice screen? Was it because it's Steve Jobs and everything he does is magic? What's the difference? So the difference is what's written in here. 3G. So before the internet, a computer, a standalone computer, was very, very limited in what it does. Once you connect the phone or the computer to the internet, you have the whole world on your desktop, or you have the whole world in your pocket. That made a huge difference, huge difference. It had nothing to do with Apple or anything else. It was just an enabler. When it got to the third generation of cellular networks, the speed of data transfer was good enough to be connected to the internet. It's that simple. And really, it was introduced in 2001, but it became widespread because you had to change the technology on all the towers. I was around 2006, 2007. The iPhone was introduced in 2007. And not a coincidence. GPS. Think about how many applications we have that rely on GPS, right? Volt, Get, Bengo, you name it, right? So it made it very, very useful, tremendously useful. But you needed the GPS to work. So you needed the satellites, and you needed a chip that is cheap enough to put in a phone, okay? So this is the technology coming in. And by the way, at the beginning, the GPS was meant for military purposes. As you are all, you know, we are one of those utterly fortunate countries that understand the connection between GPS and missiles, right? And we say, shit, you know, it doesn't work again because I'm in the north, right? So you are, you know, enablers, you understand the enablers. When there is GPS, it's fairly easy to send very accurate missiles. When there's no GPS, it's kind of harder. So that's why it was a military, you know, top secret military stuff. By the way, the US has another set of satellites for GPS that are encrypted so that they can turn off the regular ones when they want and turn on their military ones. Why? Because they're also afraid of missiles coming in. So just so that you understand how this whole thing works. Okay. Any questions until now before we move on? Did I make myself clear? Do you understand what I'm talking about? Yeah? Okay. Enough examples? You're tired with them? Okay. All right. So what do we have? We have now this thing, okay? There's another thing that happened in here, and it's this one. There are only two operating systems. There is the iOS, the Apple one, and there is the Android by Google. Google bought Android, by the way. That's why it's called Android. That was the name of the company. What does that mean? And I'll explain. You want to develop an application for phones, right? And I'm sure about it, right? Absolutely, yeah. They're like a dating application. But the problem is that there are about 100 manufacturers of phones, and each one of them have their own operating system. So you say, oh my God, which one is the most popular? Well, they are not. You know, one of them is 2% of the market, the other is 3% of the market. What am I going to do? I'm not going to develop 100 versions of the same thing just so that I can cover the market. That was the situation in the early days of computers, of mainframes. In the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, there were probably 50 different flavors of mainframes. Even at the same company, IBM had maybe 4 or 5 different operating systems, totally different operating systems. That made it very difficult to develop software and make money because you needed to keep so many versions of the software. So we take it for granted that the world has standardized. The world has standardized. And that made life easy, which means it frees up resources to do the work and the research instead of worrying about what am I going to do. So when you travel and you have 110 and 220 voltage, right? So in the old days, there was this transformer, the big transformer with coils. Nowadays, you have a small, tiny transformer, and actually most of the things today connect to the USB, and that's about it, and you don't even think about it anymore. So the world is going to standards in order to free up energy and resources, so you don't have to worry about this. And you can see that in many, many things that you do. So what I'm trying to say is you have an enabler. You have a screen, you have memory, you have GPS. Think about the list of the GPS application. Waze, Pango, Uber, Get, Volt, and many others. What is difficult about them? Do you need PhDs from MIT to develop those? No. No, you don't. You don't. You don't. And that's what I'm trying to tell you. Remember I said that these enablers actually open the world for you in ways that didn't exist before. So you don't have to think about, okay, I'm going to develop this disruptive thing, you know, I'm going to change the world. No, with relatively small amount of investment and thinking like a businessman and not like a crazy inventor, you can develop tremendously useful products and applications that actually, once they are implemented, do change the world. Who is not using Waze? Wow. Right? You don't go to the car to go to a place that is not 100 meters away and you don't turn on Waze. Right? But it's not complicated. You know? They develop Waze, we all use it. And the more people use it, the better it becomes. Right? So it's a nice cycle of improvement. Okay, who is not ordering food through Volt? You? I'll talk to you later, okay? I'll talk to you later. But if I were you, I would vote like this. No, okay. What you see is that these applications, by sheer success, do change the world. So the application itself, the product development of it, is the tiniest fraction of what you do. And that's kind of the main message I'm trying to say throughout. I know you're in an innovation class. So the way you need to think about innovation is not so much about the features, is not so much about technology. It is the use. Who is going to use it? How are they going to use it? How do I do that? And I will give examples in a moment to explain that. Wanted to ask something?
I want to give also an example, but we can speak about it.
Okay. By the way, most of the applications on the phone are not business applications, so I'm encouraging you to start thinking very creatively about business applications. Okay. As I said in here, like agriculture, insurance, traffic, whatever it is. What I want to talk to you now is expand. We talked about the iPhone as an enabler, but there are many other enablers, many more. So if you want ideas for products and markets, I can open the window for you. Okay. First of all, there's the standards. We talked about it. Okay. There's an enormous computing power at your fingertips. When I started my way in this market and I wanted to develop software, the first thing I needed to do was build a server room. You guys don't even know what a server room is, right? It's a room where you have a rack, and inside the rack there are servers, and you need to put air conditioning because otherwise it will burn. Nowadays, what you need is a credit card. You go to Amazon Web Services, AWS, you put your credit card, and lo and behold, you can decide whether you want to have a huge farm of computers or just 2 computers, whatever you want. It's just a matter of money, and you pay by the minute, not by the hour, by the minute. Tremendously easy. Cloud computing, as I said in here, scalable. I mean, I'll go through that easily, okay? There are powerful technologies at your fingertips today. So you don't even have to develop the technology, you just need to use it, okay? There's something called deep learning algorithms. I'll give you examples later on. Translation. Who didn't use Google Translate? So translation was one of those difficult problems that people tried to tackle since the 50s. I mean, 1950s, not 1850. And unsuccessfully. Literally, I don't know how many hundreds of millions of dollars went into developing software to translate unsuccessfully. Because what they tried to do is the logical thing, which is, first of all, we need to understand the grammar of, let's say, English and Hebrew. Take the sentence in Hebrew, understand the grammar, what is the noseh, nasu, and so forth, and try to rebuild it in English using what I just understood. So that means I need to understand the grammar of every language I want to deal with. What happened in recent years, which is what Google Translate and all the other translators do, is actually completely dropped that idea and went with a different idea, which is kind of brute force. And that's why when you do Google Translate, they drop a list of all the languages you can translate. And there are maybe 50 or 60 different languages. You just choose to which language you want to translate to. And the way they do it is statistical. We don't have time, but at the end, if you will want to talk to me about it, I'll explain to you how the translation works. Speech to text, same thing. Was a very, very difficult problem. Nowadays, you upload anything to YouTube, and automatically it does speech to text, and you can get the text. How they do it? Again, training the computer statistically about it. Okay? But this is tremendously powerful. I'll give you an example. I give these lectures in English because I want all the tapes to be in English so I can put them around the world. Not too many people speak Hebrew. But I do have a company I work with that unfortunately they don't understand English. But I want them to come to the lectures. So what we do is we put a computer. It turns it speech to text. We take the text and we move it into Google Translate. And I speak English and they see what I say in Hebrew. He says, I talked to the guy, I had a lecture on Sunday, I asked, how did it go? He says, this one went really, really well. You put a better computer. It does a really, really good job, except sometimes it starts to curse. Says, I don't understand what you say, but suddenly there's a four-letter word on the screen, and I kind of assume you didn't say it. So, and that we did at no cost, just a computer. Everything is free. Speech to text, I said, business sales, go on chorus, there's a lot of stuff. I will not. Okay, so you can start seeing the uses of all of that stuff that used to be companies. This, for example, one of the first successful companies in speech to text was the software wasn't very good, so they needed a niche where they can sell, and they found radiologists. So radiologists look at an X-ray, and they give you the transcription of what they find. And to make it fast, they would just talk. And this software would do that. That was one of the first. It was in the 80s. Became a very successful company, and it was very, very narrow. Picture recognition. Okay. I don't know how many of you know that you can go to Google Pictures. Yeah, you all know it, right? Just to tell you this. This is new. This is from 2015, 2016. I don't know how many PhD dissertations were done on recognizing dogs in a picture. Here's a photograph. Tell me if there is a dog on this photograph and show me where the dog is. When my daughter was young, that was 30 years ago, and I'm in this subject, okay? I did with artificial intelligence for all my life. So I understood where the limits are. And there was this book, and the book was, Where is the Teddy? And it was pictures. You know that, right? And you can see the teddy bear, putting his paw out of the bed or in a pocket or whatever it is. And it's kind of For a computer, it's very difficult. And I showed it to my daughter, and she was a year old, 2 years old, I don't remember. And she says, it's right here, it's here, it's here. And I said, you are so smart. It's unbelievable. You know, people do a PhD and you couldn't do what you just did. But that's the reality. Computers couldn't do any of that stuff. They couldn't. Okay? And now you have it on your phone. So, picture recognition, I want to talk to you about a story. Okay? There was a company called Clearview AI. And again, think about the difference between innovation as you might think about it as great invention versus a business use of it. The innovation was developing this software that can do it. And again, that innovation is founded on what's called deep learning. And the deep learning is founded on technology that preceded it in the 1950s called perceptrons. So there's a whole evolution. It took a long time for it to go from a perceptron to what's called deep learning. About 70 years went across. Okay? But anyway, the technology now exists. And this smart guy, I can't pronounce his name, Hon Ton That or whatever his name is, he's in New York, he's Korean, and he came up with an interesting idea. I can do face recognition and know who the person is. You have a Facebook page? You have your picture on it? You have your name on it? I can read it. I can train a computer to recognize you. You see the problem? You have a LinkedIn page? Yes. You have your picture on it? You have your name? You have your entire history on it? Yes, I can read it. Well, legal is a very flexible thing, okay? You published it? You published it, right? He published it, I published it. So we publish in the sense of we put it in the public domain, right? He's not using it for anything except recognize you. So what he did, this guy, is he started searching the internet, took big databases like Facebook and LinkedIn and others, and built a database. And he has tens of millions of people that he can recognize their picture, and he has their name, he has their LinkedIn page, their Facebook page. He knows who they are. And the first question you asked me is it legal, right? So he said, okay, I can sell it to supermarkets so they can recognize people, but that might not go very well. But how about if I only sell it to certified police departments? That's what he's doing, okay? So he's selling it to certified police departments, and it works really, really well. He claims that his face recognition algorithms are the best in the world. I don't know. There's another place where they do the same thing. Can you figure out where they do the same thing? Great, in China. So if you walk into China, you put your foot in China. So a friend of mine went to China for a visit, and he was in the airport trying to figure out where he needs to, which gate he needs to go. And there was information big there, and there was a screen, and empty screen. So he walks to the screen, and suddenly the screen is filled with his picture. And he says, "Hi, David, welcome to China. Your gate is so-and-so." He said he almost dropped dead. Yep. So if you are in China, you probably are tracked by name, not just picture, by name, throughout every time you leave the hotel, and probably inside the hotel as well, and inside your bed as well. So I would be careful when I'm in China. I would be careful there as well. And soon enough, you should be careful in Israel. So that just shows you how the difference between technology and innovation in technology that took 60 years, 70 years, and what happens once the technology matures, becomes inexpensive, becomes well understood, and people start doing applications with it. Because I assume most of you don't want to do a PhD, but maybe start a company or invent something useful, go with things that are already invented. Okay, so what are the other enablers that we have? I brought many already. So ChatGPT. Who doesn't know what ChatGPT is? Okay, so two sides to ChatGPT. One is amazing, and the other is actually more powerful. So the amazing thing is you ask it a question and you get an answer. Sometimes the answer is wrong, but it gives you an answer. To me, that's less amazing than the fact that it understands the question. Again, I've been in this market for I don't know how many years, and it was extremely difficult to talk to computers. You had to write in a computer language. You have to be very specific. Computers didn't understand you. But think about the television set you're going to buy next year. And I'm serious. It's probably going to be next year or the following year. You will sit in front of the television and you say, hey, TV, remember the movie I saw yesterday? Do you have another movie with the same star? I want a funny one this time. And you're going to get the movie. Okay? You're going to get the movie. You're going to start talking to your stuff at home. Hey, it's too cold. Can you make it a little warmer? It will become warmer. Is my food ready? No, another 5 minutes. Okay? Why? Because everything is available. There's nothing in what I just said that is not doable today at this moment with about 2 weeks of an engineer. Literally. The TV one, think about it. You take ChatGPT, you understand the question, you go to IMDb and you get the answer, and then you figure out at what channel it is. 3 databases, that's all what you need. Nothing. Zero. 3 weeks work. You understand what I'm trying to tell you? It's not scary. You can all be stinking rich.
I know what they can do with our information.
Privacy? Anybody here worries about privacy? Forget about it. Okay. By the way, we're just going back about 500 years. So when we lived in small villages, everybody knew everything that needs to be known, right? So it was just a small circle, but it was the only circle you knew, and that's the circle who knew you. So we're going back. Okay. High quality verbal man-machine dialogue. Talk to your TV, okay? That's another thing that I work with companies on doing. The problem, again, with computers until today is that they don't speak human language. So they speak databases and forms. Think about forms, right? Why do we have a form? Because computer can't understand what you write. So they force you to put what they want you to put inside boxes. Think about it. Stupid, right? If you think about it, it's stupid. First name, you put your first name. Why? Because the computer doesn't know it's your first name. So you have to put it in a box, right? And last name in a box, and so forth and so on. You take it for granted just because computers were stupid. But when computers stop to be stupid, that means they can start reading, for example, contracts. They can start reading invoices. They can start reading human-readable text, parse it, understand it, and then put it in a database so that computers can work on it. What I'm trying to tell you is that this is so new, we don't even understand the possibilities and what it's going to do. But I can assure you 10 years from now, the world will look radically different. Radically different, because it's so easy. It's already looked radically different than from the days when you were kids. Okay, what are the other technology enablers? Well, you recognize that one, right? Can be for good things, can be for bad things. Until now, we basically know it from the bad things, but in reality, it gives you a whole different view of the world from above. And that has tremendous potential for doing all kinds of things. So I leave it to you. 3D printing has been around for 20 years. Didn't yet find the niche where it suddenly changes the world. But it is, one day you will wake up and medicine.
Medicine now, and this will be the future of the printing,
Right.
organs, everything.
It starts, but there is still not a killer app that people say, oh my God, that's what 3D is doing. But it will come. DNA manipulation. Those of you who don't know what CRISPR is, shame on you. You should study it. It's really simple. You know, it's just you need 2 PhDs and you can understand it. It's not a big issue. But basically what it means is there is a technology today. You can go to your DNA or any DNA, figure out where you want to be, cut it, stick in something, connect it, and keep going. So you can edit the DNA. Big changes coming around. Okay? Soon to be here, self-driving cars. What's the problem with self-driving cars?
Ethics?
No. The problem is us. Okay. How many car accidents happen because you tried to text while driving? How many? Okay. Because of that, we forbid driving? No. Because of that, we tell people not to do it? Yes, but they never listen to us, right? Do we force people to put their phone inside a safe lock, and until they lock it with the phone, the car doesn't start? No. How many people died from a self-driving car? How many? No, from a self-driving car. How many people died? It's very, very, very easy answer. One. One person. One person. Okay? So why? Because as human beings, we're very forgiving to people's mistakes. Right? Okay. Yeah, he was texting, he killed my wife. Well, that's what happens, right? We're very forgiving. Well, you know, he had a hard time, so we won't even put him in jail. But if a machine does a mistake, we go berserk. We go crazy. Which is actually the opposite that should happen. And I'll explain to you why. Let's say that I convince you not to text while you drive. Now I need to convince him. Now I need to convince her. Because each one of us is independent. So that means it's an endless effort. However, if we identify what killed this guy from the single accident that was there and we improve it, all self-driving machines will have that improvement automatically. Remember we talked about your computer rebooting all the time? So you can spread the knowledge to every single car. You cannot spread the knowledge to every single driver. Forget it. So the logic should be the opposite. We can improve our machines tremendously. We cannot improve our people. They're still grown-up chimpanzees. We won't change it in the next 20,000 years. So one day, that will happen, okay? And the moment that will happen, a lot of things will change because actually, if you think about it, your car basically takes parking space in the street for most of the time. You use it for half an hour a day, an hour a day at best, and the rest of the time it just takes space. That's all what it does, just takes space. What else? I trust you will figure it out, okay? Okay, I want to do one more thing. You gave me not enough time, so let me jump. There's one more example I want to go into. So most of you know that you want to be the first, right? That's what they teach you in school. You have to be the first. But here are the reasons people say it. There's no competitors. The market is all yours. You set the standards. You set the pricing. You can get a patent. And you can create the product category, blah, 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 blah. All the good things you can have. But let's look at it more seriously. So social networks. I say social networks, you say Facebook. But let's look at the history. 1995, okay, classmates.com. Still active, 20 million users. Planet All, 6 Degrees, Friendsters, LinkedIn, still exists. HI5, MySpace, yada, 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 yada. Until it comes to Facebook and Facebook wins. Why did Facebook win? Anybody has any idea why Facebook won?
Everybody with the computers,
It's
more people
more
with the
people,
computer.
it's not for something.
What?
Social.
Yes. Very nice. Until Facebook, it was social networks. I wrote specifically, social networks. That means I get in, and the computer reads my address book and sends email to everybody and says, oh, Yonatan is on Facebook, come and see it. So they say, oh, that's cool. And they join and they look at me, and after about 2 minutes, he says, yeah, he looks old. I remember him young. Okay. Next week, there's nothing for them to do. It's just not very interesting. So there is a hype. People join and they drop because there's nothing to do there. It's boring. And then they came with what's called today social media, which is different than social networks. So they started to force people to publish things. If you remember the early days, 2004, how many of you were not born yet? No. So they started publishing. And I remember laughing at it because they said, oh, I just came out of the bathroom. Oh, I just had dinner. You know, it was ridiculous because they forced you to publish all the time. And they started building the feed. And social networks started to transform from networks to media. And that became interesting. And that's where they grew. But it took 10 years to figure out what doesn't work. 10 years to figure out what doesn't work. Remember that. So the first movers are the ones that are dead. The big guys also wanted to go in, right? If there is a market that is interesting, let's go in. So Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Yahoo. Facebook tried to compete now against Twitter. Remember that? Failed as well. It turns out that once somebody was able to capture the market, it doesn't matter that you are big and you have millions of users. It was very difficult for them to penetrate. So there is this balance between first movers, be really the first, and once you are established as the leader, it's not that easy to compete against you. So there's this balance. You ask, how do you know when? Sorry. My next lecture, and don't listen to me. Nobody knows. Okay. All right, search engines. We only know one, Google. But again, it started way before that, okay? Vlib, Jughead, yada, 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 web crawler, Lycos. I remember Lycos and InfoSeek. There are many. There were dozens of them. Yahoo, and then Google. Look at the market share. Now, why did they become the dominant one? They were ridiculously focused on the user experience. So I'll give you an example. What do we mean by user experience? In their research, they figure out something that all of you experienced, but you never thought about. When you try to do something and it's just slow, compared to when you try to do something and it just works really fast, you know, before you even finish thinking, it's done. The user experience is not the saving of split seconds. It's just not. It's not that at the end of the day you say, I can just save 5 seconds today by using Google all the time. That's not the way it works. Google figured out that if you have to wait more than 200 milliseconds, that's 0.2 seconds, okay, for the results to come in, your pleasure goes down significantly. So today, if you build a website, you get an analysis from Google, very, very deep analysis, telling you how long it takes for each page to load. And if it's above a half a second, 500 milliseconds, they give you a warning. Hey, we're not going to show your page because people get angry. So you better fix your website to respond within 200 milliseconds. And there are many other examples, but this bad guy doesn't let me talk, so I have to move on. Next time I'll talk to you about it. Okay. Music MP3, there's one thing that I will move through it very quickly. So MP3 players, music players were around for a long time. Okay, I will go quick about it. Until it arrived to the iPod. And the iPod took the market by storm. And the question is, what was the difference between the different, the previous ones and the iPod? You wanted to listen to music, right? So the iPod without music was just a nice thing you can throw at your kid. You needed music. Where do you get the music? So before most people would share music. Have you ever heard about Napster? Yeah, right? So I have my music, you have your music, let's exchange. You asked about legal, right? Well, it's illegal to do. So how do you get the music was a problem. And because you get kind of random music from friends, it was interesting for really music players. What Steve Jobs did is the impossible innovation. He convinced the large music companies to give him access to all their music for 99 cents a piece of music. That was it, 99 cents, regardless of who is the author, who is the publisher, nothing. 99 cents, and you get any song you want. The innovation was not, this was a nice tool, I'm not saying not. But the real innovation was it opened up the music industry in a really standard, remember the word standard, simple way to everybody. It was from the beginning, yes. Yes, when they launched the iPod, it was with the music store, yes. That's at least what I remember. Maybe. And if not, he was smart enough to figure it out. No, it was, you can go and buy music for 99 cents. He did the same thing again with the iPhone. Same thing again with the iPhone. What did he do with the iPhone? He went to AT&T. I remember I was living in the US at the time. And before the iPhone, the people or the companies that control the market for the phones were the network companies. The people who gave you the access to the network. They controlled which phones you're going to have. And Nokia was controlling that with them. It was the iPhone that changed the equation. You buy the phone and then you decide to which network you connect. Before that, you choose the network and they gave you the phone. Okay? It was very different. So he did that. I have tremendous respect for Steve Jobs. I think he did phenomenal things, mainly because he understood the business of it. And he always brought the business to work. So he did it with the music, he did it with movies, with Pixar, and he did it with the phone. I always tell people when people come to me to work with us, I say, forget about your technology, it's irrelevant. I know you have a patent and 2 PhDs in your background. Doesn't matter at all. Think about the business. That's the only thing you need to think about, because otherwise you will have a phenomenal product nobody ever heard about. Okay, questions? Yes?
How do you know that the problem is in timing? Because sometimes you have a really silly idea and then you have a reaction of people that it's not a great idea, but eventually it is, because people not sometimes recognize the good idea. So how do you know that the timing is wrong or that your idea is wrong? You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. And there are 2 answers to it. The first answer is it's extremely difficult to predict the future. So I will not tell you how you can predict the future because you can't. Well, okay. Second is you say, okay, I have this great idea. Nobody understands what I'm talking about. And when they understand what I'm talking about, they think I'm silly. What can I do in order to convince some people, not the whole world? You need a beachhead. You need a group of customers that will appreciate what you do, pay for it because you need money, okay? And they will kind of validate that there is a use for it and that it's going to work. And that's really the key when I work with companies. I always tell them, what is your beachhead? What is the group of people that will recognize what you do, pay for it, and think it's the best thing since sliced bread. I don't know why sliced bread, because it's horrible. But you don't know what the American sliced bread is. You don't want it. Anyway, but that's really the key. You asked a wonderful question, and the answer is to find a small group of users. For them, your solution really makes a difference. And you can convince them, and you can demonstrate it to them specifically. Forget about the big market. When people come and say, there is a $5 billion market, I say, who cares, you know? Give me a list of people who use it. That's better to me than tell me $5 billion market. Okay? Yes?
I have a great solution, great example, sorry about what you said before. Anyone knows Yonatan Stern? מישהו מכיר את Yonatan Stern? שמעתם עליה? She was the co-founder of Oljos. So when we met like 10 years ago, and she told me that she collected from a few magazines and newspapers, jobs, jobs of any kind of jobs. And she united them, and then she sold Oljos. It's like a database. Need a PhD alone, need the engineering degree. That's just something that maybe people will use. So she felt like a businesswoman, and maybe that's why she did her act. That's what I think.
I can give you thanks. I give you two examples of things that had tremendous feeling against it, and it worked at the end. If 30 years ago you said, I'm going to give you a service where you will hitchhike and a car will come and there was a guy sitting in there and you're going to go into the car and not ask questions. You will say, my mother would kill me. There's no way I'm going to go in a car with a stranger. And you are laughing, right? Okay, there's no way I'm going to live in an apartment with another guy. I don't know him, but I'll just walk in and I'm going to sleep there. No way on earth. Okay, so you can see that it takes smarts. I don't know how to say it. I mean, look at Get. Get decided that they're not going to go into that problem. They're just going to go become a taxi cab office. That's it. But Uber tried to change behavior and succeeded. Airbnb tried to change behavior and succeeded. Still, the issue of safety is very high on there, so they spend tremendous amount of effort to prove to you that it's safe. But it's a big problem. Uber spent so many hundreds of millions of dollars, it's not even funny. And they're still, I don't know if they're profitable already. And the reason was, think about it, if they want to go, they go by market. So you go into a new city and they say, okay, we have Uber. I open my app and there are no drivers. What am I going to do? Forget it. Uber doesn't work, right? So they needed to make sure before they enter the city to have hundreds, if not thousands of people who are going to be the drivers. And that cost a lot of effort and money. So it wasn't an easy thing. Yes. Another question?
Let me just say that what Jonathan said now about Uber is exactly the story of Michelin. Who else needs to innovate for my innovation to matter? So if you've got no driver, the innovation is irrelevant. We'll talk about it next semester.
There is plenty of room for innovation, what I call business innovation, which is we're not going to develop a whole new technology and change the world. We're just going to make money. There's nothing wrong with making money, by the way, as long as it's legal. And what I tried to tell you here is that there is this huge amount of enablers today. And new ones are coming on the market all the time. Okay? ChatGPT is going to change the world in many small ways and in many ways that you can take advantage of. And it doesn't have to be, I'm going to develop an application and we're going to sell $2 billion in revenues. That's not the point. The point I'm trying to make you is think about a simple application for lawyers, as far as I'm concerned, okay? For doctors, for whatever it is. Develop something useful for them, simple. And just think about it. You go to a doctor today, okay, in Kupat Cholim. Hi, doctor. Hi, what's your name again? Give me your card. Okay, so he runs the car, he moves the screen. Okay, what's the issue today? It doesn't look at you. Literally doesn't look at you, right? Yeah, I see you say, yeah. He doesn't look at you. I had a pain in here. I went to my doctor, and he started doing that. And he started, I said, don't you want to see it? He says, no. I said, it hurts here, okay? Can you please check me? Reluctantly, he did. Really reluctantly, okay? And he says, now I see, yeah, I understand. Why do I need him? So think about if you put ChatGPT, you walk into and he starts talking to you because the ChatGPT is taking all the information and put it in on the screen. He doesn't have to type. He can look at you again. And by the way, the ChatGPT is connected to a database, and it says, based on what this guy says, he might have X, Y, or Z. I recommend you send him to this test. And the doctor doesn't tell you it's ChatGPT saying it. He said, that's interesting. It can't be, let me think, X, Y, or Z. Yeah, maybe. There's a test you should. He will be so smart. Yes.
According to what you said, everything is becoming more and more easy. And you talk about the ChatGPT, so I can now write, please make me some application. So what is going to do with, what's going to be with the competition? Competition will be very hard.
It was always very hard, okay? What differentiates between successful companies and not successful companies is a crazy commitment to customers and quality. I'll give you an example, okay? Remember I showed you card scanner. Remember my friend saying we will be the best. So just to bring you back to 1993, 1994, there were no laptops, there were desktops, and to connect the scanner to the computer, you need to open the desktop, put card, a connector card, close it, install software. I showed it to my board, and they said to me, you must be joking. Right? You're trying to sell it to business people, and you expect business people to open their PC, put a card, install software? No way. They're not going to do that. So I said, listen, that's the only thing I have to sell. So I either sell it or I don't sell it, but that's what I have. I sold 6,000 units of that. Doesn't matter. But they had problems, and they started calling our tech support. So my tech support people became flooded and started to give not a very good service. And I was adamant. I said, listen, people call us. That's the best thing that can happen to us. A customer really talking to us. He bought it in the store. He has a box. And now he's calling us. We need to make their experience when he calls us or she calls us to be the best. Because that's the most important thing. So we changed the way we were doing technical support calls. So all of you tried to call a place, right? And with the problem, you have to wait for next available agent, right? You are number 19 in a line. It's going to take 25 minutes. You can leave your phone number, blah, 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 right? You're excited. It's the best thing that ever happened to you. You just slam the phone and you're angry. That's what happens. So I said, innovation. We pick up the phone. The phone rings, you pick up the phone. And the first line is like, Hadar Miyun in hospital. That's the first line. You pick up the phone and you find what's the problem. Sir, did you put the plug in the wall? Oh, I forgot, sorry. Okay, put the plug in the wall. Did you try to turn the computer on? Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, so they had 3 minutes to solve the problem. If they couldn't solve it in 3 minutes, they said, sir, let me transfer you to our senior technical support engineer. Okay, you are escalated. And then they moved it to somebody else. If the senior technical support engineer was busy, because we only had 3 people altogether, they said, okay, sir, let me call you back when he is available. You will never call me back. Sir, how long did it take for you to get me on the phone? He says, yeah, you're right. Sir, we will call you back. So we got the person off the phone, we called them back, and we solved the problem. At that time, when you installed something, you need to reboot the computer. Rebooting took 4 minutes. Okay? What do you do with 4 minutes on the phone talking about baseball, the weather, you know? It's a waste of time for that person and for us. So we told them when they rebooted the computer, if it doesn't work, call us. No, don't leave the phone. I said, how long did it take for us to answer? Oh yeah, you're right. Okay, if it doesn't work, call us. We were able to deal with 10 times more phone calls than before with the same number of people. At the end of each week, we had a meeting. We looked at the calls and we tried to resolve the problems that came up most frequently. Our tech support became the best sales department ever. That's why we were #1 in the market. It has nothing to do with Kartsky. You understand what I'm saying? Companies succeed or fails on the way they treat their customers. And it's very difficult to give good service. Extremely difficult. So yes, you have a chance to become #1 if you just do a good job with your users or customers.
Thank you.